welcome back to the Social Work Race. You know, this is the channel where we have discussions about the front line of social work and anyone else on the front line of social care, healthcare. Yep, we're expanding, right? And we try to have those discussions that are not being heard enough about what it's like to be on the front line, the issues around it. In the next few weeks, we have an interesting lineup of people who are prepared to talk about their experiences. I cannot wait. So thanks for joining, and I'm asking you to please share this podcast with your friends. It will help them and it will help the podcast as well. Really appreciate that. Today, we're talking about, well, this is actually for students. In fact, before I go into it, this podcast was originally set up for students because I felt that when I was studying, all the resources out there were a little bit too clinical. So I've created this platform to be really down to earth, whatever that means. Whatever that means, to be down to earth for people to understand what it is to be on the front line, for students to be easily prepared for, through the narrative of others, what it is to start the work as a social worker. So that's where my original heart was for this podcast, was to help people get through, because it was a struggle for me in that respect. And so today, and in fact, if you go back to previous podcasts, you'll see, I think I've got a couple there for students, and I will always keep student social workers, always there in the work that I produce in the future. And if you're a student and you want to share your journey, let me know. Send me an email to thesocialworkrace@gmail.com. Would really appreciate that, because I'd love to know how we can help you whilst you're on your student journey. And so in this podcast, we're looking at 7 things for social work students. So this is going to be helpful. I think it'll be helpful. And these are things that others have given to me and that I've learned myself. Number 1, I would say it's okay to be anxious. So when you start with social work, you're going to enter an office and everybody's looking at you. There are no smiles necessarily. And you just, as much as you study, that's the theoretical part. But you won't know what it's like until you start meeting families and having to hit that software, getting your laptop, getting your phone, receiving phone calls. You know this is going to happen. And you're going to be surrounded by people that you don't know. And for those of us who are, introverts or maybe naturally anxious, don't worry about it. You're going to make really good friends. You're going to meet families that you're going to love, and you're going to meet families that are going to be a struggle. You're going to be very confused about the software that you're using, whether it's Mosaic or Liquid Logic. I don't know what else they use out there. That's normal, but you will learn it. You will get used to it. And hopefully what I've just said just now will just ease you a little bit. Everybody went through the same thing, and you will be no different. So don't stress about that. That's my first piece of advice. Okay. And in no particular order after this, number 2, get as much face-to-face experience as possible. Your face-to-face experience is where your hardcore learning is. That's where you meet dilemmas, and you're going to meet people and see situations that you have no idea at first how to deal with. That's where your learning is. That shock treatment is really important for your development. So as opposed to running away from it or being afraid of it, look forward to it, because that's where all that crucial learning is, and where you build your resilience. Do you know what I mean? So don't worry. Get as much face-to-face contact as possible, because that's where really at least 50% of your social work experience is going to come from. It's when you meet the service users. Number 3, social work students, use theory for everything. So I want you to put on lenses. You choose your top 3 or 5 or 6 or 7 theories. Keep researching, but try to look at your service user through a set pair of lenses, whether it be systems theory, social identity, psychodynamic. You use those theories to interpret who you see in front of you. And, when you do your assessments, I'm not experiencing all types of social work, but what I can say, and I also worked in the Youth Justice Service, you're going to need theory in your assessments. So when you're trying to understand and analyze a family, you're going to need theory, and you need to be really accustomed to using theory, because it helps to separate you and your personal opinions from what you see. Sometimes using 2 theories. I know in youth justice, they primarily use 2 types of theory to view the young person, which is fine. And those theories are quite broad as well. But always, whenever you're reading a story, reading case notes, use a theoretical perspective and try to draw conclusions with theoretical perspectives. Try and understand it. It's not just a matter of just throwing a theory at it, but you've got to understand your client through the eyes of another perspective other than your own. And some social workers do struggle with that, because it is a skill. Not everybody has the same skill. But if you're looking at someone who maybe isn't in work, for example, or isn't really socializing much, social identity theory, how do you interpret a service user of that nature with those challenges through theory? You've got to help someone else who's reading the assessment understand what your service user is going through that theoretical perspective. And obviously, when you're doing your assignments, they're going to want you to use theory, because theory is a big part of your studies. So always try to use theory to interpret, and practice it in your minds quietly, and then also incorporate into your assessments. You're going to need that. Number 4. Did I tell you it was 7 things? I don't know if I mentioned it. 7 things for social work students. I think I did. Okay. Make notes on your phone as you go, because it makes learning efficient. What do I mean? I did this, and believe me, this saved me so much hassle. Okay. I'm going to tell you how. I have Google Drive, and I use Google Docs, and I used it from my phone or my iPad or my laptop. Wherever I was, I could log in and just get into my assignments, okay? And I would always, whatever I experience, whatever contact I made with someone, whatever happened to me in that day, that week, I would always grab my phone and make notes of what I'd learned. And I might add a theory or just reflect on it, covering my PCF learning, right? My professional capabilities learning. Or it would be a particular assignment. It could have been a sociology assignment, or a particular any assignment in any topic in social work. Because I'm making notes as I go, I would in effect be building my assignments as I go. And because it's on cloud, I can always access it. You can't really lose your work unless you willfully delete it, right? Use your phone as you go. So have Google Drive or Dropbox, whatever you want. Or if it's iPhone, it's iCloud, make notes as you go. It's even just a sentence. And that's one of the ways that you kind of log your learning, so that you can draw on it when you're building your assignments. It makes your learning efficient, because everything that you believe and think and every opinion that you have, jot it down. It's there logged for life. So make use of cloud. Also, you're going to be using cloud in your work anyway, because when they give you a phone and when they give you a laptop, it's going to be stored on cloud, all the information that you have. So always make notes on the go. In fact, I'll give you an example. When I actually go on home visits, I don't really use a notepad. Sometimes I just send an email of the notes to myself. So when I finish the session, because really you don't want to be pulling out your notepad during a home visit, especially if it's a sensitive issue. You just want to listen. You've got to do it by memory, and your memory will get better. And so what I do is I make bullet point notes and then I email it to myself. So you've got to make use of the cloud, because that's what you're going to need for the job. You don't want to get home like some social workers actually do and try to memorize 3 visits. It's not good, because you're always going to miss something. So when I get back in the car, I bullet point all of the points I want to make for my case notes or my assessment, and I can draw upon it later on. Number 5, learn the primary laws in your department. This is a really quick one. You know, when I say that, it might actually turn out to be a lot longer. The primary laws. I work in child protection, child in need, adolescent safeguarding. So it's, the section 31, section 47, section 20, and just understand the nature of them. If you work in mental health, then it would be the Mental Capacity Act. I don't know much about it, to be honest, although I have I have a good overview of it. But and the Mental Health Act as well. I don't know them inside out because it's not my department. But it's always good to know them, because they will help guide you, especially in your assignments, but also in your practice as well. Just become really acquainted with them. And it's not about reading them all, because some of these laws, most social workers do not know them inside out, because they're very long and and because it's law, it's extremely comprehensive. But you've got to know the sections that are relevant to your job. So not all sections of section 31 am I going to understand or know. Nobody does. But that's not the point. Grow as you grow into the practice of just understanding the legal frameworks that govern your department. I did say it was going to be short, didn't I? All right, where were we? Number 6. I was going to do a broader podcast on this one, but I'll get someone to interview me on this one, or I'll get to interview someone on this one. Is ignore colleagues who give you a hard time. Number 6. Ignore the colleagues who give you a hard time. You can probably expect that there's going to be someone that's going to treat you as a student. Or look down on you, or just not be friendly. You can expect that. That's nothing to do with social work. That's just people. But I want to encourage you on this particular point. Expect it and learn how to either ignore it or navigate it. Because these colleagues, they cannot affect your grade or how successful you are in your placement. They have no impact on it. You have to kind of give them the power to impact you. You could start another job and still have the same experience. But I think that you will, as a student, you will be slightly on your back foot, because a student label kind of diminishes what you're about. There are some students out there that have really experienced, and some that are just fresh out of uni and have never really done this work before. Ignore these people. Do not let people throw you off. You are really, although you're a student social worker. Don't let anyone take that away from you. Stand strong in what you are, not even just as a social worker, but as you. Don't let anyone take away or give you anxiety that you do not deserve. If people want to ignore you, talk about you, just let it be water off your back. Do you know what I mean? Don't let that happen. It will happen at some point. Don't let it take away your power. Or rather, don't give your power away. Ignore them. There's always going to be someone that you're going to be getting on well with. Migrate to them, and eventually you might be able to navigate a way around these difficult, challenging people. Number 7. This is important. Ask questions. Never think, and you've heard this a million times, but I'm going to tell you again, because even as a social worker, I have to ask questions. even from people who are not social workers. Ask. It's better for you to sound stupid than to just not know. And even if you forget 10 times, keep asking. In fact, I have colleagues who are not necessarily social workers, but they're maybe either as support or they work in departments that are important administrative roles. I have to call them repeatedly to ask them how to do X, Y, and Z. Don't think that because you're a social worker that you're supposed to know everything. You won't. Ask. And if you're a student, ask. It's a good habit. You're going to need to learn to ask as a social worker, because although we're expected to know everything, we just don't. It's that simple. Don't be afraid to ask questions. It will save you a lot of headache. It will save you a lot of headache. Now, that's it. My final question to you, though, is what questions do you want answered as a student in social work? Let me know at thesocialworkrace@gmail.com, and we'll get to those questions, and maybe you can join the show if you want. You don't have to. It can be quite scary. Let me know. Otherwise, look after yourself and take care.